and we can like get a team together. Anybody want to voluntarily do that? I've never met anybody who objected to that. Now some people might say, I can build my own hut. I mean, you guys go right ahead. I don't need to do that. I can build my own, but yeah, why on earth would I object to people getting along voluntarily and doing that? Well, there's a term for that. It's called anarchism, which means I do these events, everyone is against government and everyone is in favor of anarchy. Anarchy, that scary word. In other words, voluntarism, getting along peacefully without a violent, dominating authority trying to forcibly run the show. So people are naturally what they need to be. And this is why there's hope. Because we don't need people to learn some complicated solution. You know, it's so easy for people to look at politics and go, well, I voted for that guy, and 4 years later I voted for that guy, and everything keeps getting worse. And these people say really big words, and they must know more than I do, and you know, it's we can't possibly handle it. So it's got to be up to the political class. You know, they have all these rituals. They must know more than us. They must be more informed. We should just leave it up to them. And it always gets worse, but people fall for it because they think you have to be really, really smart to run things. That's one of my favorite terms is when people say, well, we need somebody to run things. Well, okay, that's really darn vague. Do you need somebody to tell you how to grocery shop? Well, no, I can do that. Okay, do you go to the store? You know, what are the things that you need to be run? In what way do you need to be run by this guy who needs to run things? Well, it's not me, it's other people. Okay, well, every individual says it's not them, it's other people, which something doesn't add up with that, because it's no individual, it's always all the other people other than each individual, which doesn't make any sense. But people speak in these vague terms, like somebody has to be in charge, or somebody has to run things. And often people will say, well, I know you're against government, but I think people need to be organized. And I say, okay, me too. And we need to cooperate. Yep. And people have been trained not to recognize the one thing that makes government government, which is the right to violently rule. You can still cooperate, you can still organize. I'm not saying let's every man for himself scatter. In fact, that's one of the things I ask when I do this scenario of the island. The first thing is, who wants one boss in charge who makes us do whatever he wants? Nobody likes that. Who wants every man scatter, every man for himself? Nobody's ever said, yeah, I'm for that. And yet people associate not having the master with every man for himself. And people will say, if you're against government, you just want everybody like living in like a hermit in the woods. How do you get from, I don't want someone violently dominating you, to, I want you living on your own out in the woods? The only reason they make that connection is because they've been trained to imagine connections that don't make any sense at all. And they speak in this vague terminology because I say they, I did it for years and years and years. Kind of hate to admit it because it's really embarrassing. But they talk about somebody being in charge. And there have to be rules. That's one of my favorite ones. Well, what? They just, like, rules just appear somewhere? Or we need law. Well, what is law? Well, it's the rules people have to live by. Well, like what? Like, don't attack each other. All right, I like that one. You just ruled out government. Oh, well, they get to attack us. And that's the funny thing is everybody knows the rules that matter. We don't have to teach any complicated philosophy. And that's why what I say is I don't actually teach a philosophy. What I try to do is take one lie in people's heads and get them to see that doesn't match who they are. That lie in your head called authority and government works against you. That lie is your enemy. It goes against your values. It goes against your virtues and against your goodness. It tricks you as a good person into condoning and advocating and funding evil because you've been tricked into believing, and I was tricked into believing, that if it's done in a certain way with certain rituals and elections and constitutions, then it's okay. And I never realized for years and years that my devout, well-intentioned political action was fueling evil. And I'm not exaggerating. Because advocating that your neighbor be violently robbed is evil. And we all recognize that, except in the context of politics. Well, most of us here recognize it even in that context. But most of the rest of the world think, well, So if I vote for Congress to pass a law and impose a tax on this, and then you have to pay it or else bad things happen to you, that's okay, that's legitimate, that's law and order, that's civilization. Without that, we would all be wild animals. So these are not things we fundamentally believe. These are things that fundamentally go against our values and our priorities and the way we want to interact with other human beings, which is why it takes so much training for us to accept things that go directly against who we are inside, what we believe in, what we actually want. Because if you ask a good person, like, describe your ideal society, nobody says, everyone's violently dominated. If you meet someone who says that, run the other way and stay as far away as you possibly can.
Masochist.
Masochist. If they want to be violently dominated, you know, if they want to go to some S&M whatever, be my guest, just don't tell me I have to go. But people, again, the reason there is hope, and so many people say, oh, it's doomed. You know, you look back at thousands of years of history, and it's violent domination, it's war, and this group of tyrants and this group of tyrants each send their pawns to kill each other for years and years and years. And then whoever wins, there's still a tyrant in charge. You know, the lines might change between tyrant territories, but there's still a tyrant in charge on both sides, and nasty things keep happening. We keep having war, we keep having conflict. But oh well, I guess that's how it is. The beauty is that isn't how it is. And the only reason I have any hope, I mean, I remember being in political action, and I can remember to the point I thought, I know, if I'm being honest with myself, I know that political action cannot fix this. I can go out there and say rah, rah, rah for the Libertarian Party. I can rah, rah, rah against them, and we need that. But I know voting will not result in freedom. And this was back when I believed in government. But if I was honest, I had to say, this isn't going to work. I don't know why I'm throwing all this effort in. The people out there seem to want this. They play the game. They go along with it. Why do I think that screaming about this for 4 more years is going to suddenly make everybody choose freedom? And so I was really bummed out, thinking, you know, I can holler from the rooftops how great I am about stuff, but we're just going to lose. We'll have tyranny forever. The beauty is we won't. Because to fix the world, we don't have to fix government. If we have to fix government to fix the world, we're doomed. It doesn't fix, ever. What we have to do, and we don't even have to do anything to it. We don't have to overthrow it. We don't have to vote in a new one. If everybody whose door gets knocked on by that guy says, I don't want you controlling me and I don't want you controlling my neighbor, that guy's just a wandering idiot. That is what the U.S. Congress should be. Wandering idiots who say, can't we be in charge? And 300 million people saying, no. I don't want you in charge of me. I don't want you in charge of my neighbor. Leave us all alone. And that is all that has to happen. And it's so easy to imagine government as this massive, powerful thing. Oh, it has all these resources. Yeah, it has it because we give it to them. And we give it to them, because most of us think we have an obligation to. If we all looked at the guy at the front door and said, go away, you're not getting any of my money, they wouldn't have any money. The politicians don't reach into their own wallets to pay for a tank or an aircraft carrier. They reach into our wallets. And if 300 million of us said, you don't get to reach into our wallets, we don't want that, they couldn't do anything. Well, they're big and powerful and they have the military. Well, last time I checked, the congressmen aren't the ones driving the tanks around. Soldiers are. And if the soldiers figure out, I don't have an obligation to do what that guy says, and I'm responsible for my own actions, then you get the sort of liberal hippie version, which is still true, but is what if they had a war and nobody came? That's what universal acceptance of voluntarism would be. One group of tyrants says, we're going to claim that group of land, go invade. And all the people in that piece of dirt say, who are you? You're a lunatic, go away. And the other group of tyrants says, we have to invade that. And all the people over there says, no we don't, we're getting along just fine, please go away. All of their power. Congress doesn't show up on a battlefield. Congress doesn't fund anything. Congress doesn't produce any value, any wealth, anything that does anybody any good. All the power is because we give it to them because we go along with it. And if that goes away, they really are a paper tiger. Not even paper. They're an invisible nothing that we hallucinate into being powerful. And you can very easily do an analogy of, there's some sort of primitive tribe and some nasty guy who knows technology shows up and he knows how to do a few tricks to make them go ooh and ah, and he says, I'm a god and you must give me sacrifices and give me money and worship me and do all that. And they do it thinking that he really is all-powerful. And the thing is, he is all-powerful if they all think he is, because they all obey him and they enforce his commands because they think he's powerful. They make it true by imagining it to be true. But the day they all go, oh, you just have some gadgets that we don't quite know how they work, but you're just one guy. We could hurl you into the volcano if you felt like it. You're just one guy. Then he isn't powerful anymore. The exact same thing is true of every government on earth, including the nastiest authoritarian regimes you can think of. Because their victims and their enforcers are the ones who gave them that power. And if they ever wake up and realize that the guy knocking at the front door is not their friend, they can take that power away. And all the politicians will be is narcissistic, sociopathic lunatics mumbling to themselves in a corner about how important they are. And you don't have to do anything to them. Nobody will even hear them. Nobody will care. It's just, oh, poor them. It must be unpleasant to live such a deluded life, but oh well. Let's go do whatever we want. So there is hope for humanity. If you rely on politics, there isn't the slightest shred of hope in the world. But there is hope because all people have to do is outgrow a particular lie. And they already have all the virtue they need, all the wisdom they need. I'm all for people being even nicer and even more intelligent. We don't even need that to get a world that is 100 times better than we have now if they will just let go of that one lie called authority in government and just say, all right, now we're just people. What do we do? Because most people, when that's the question, they think, well, I don't want to be in violent conflict. Like, how do we cooperate in a way that isn't that? And the funny thing is that when people start to think about a world without a government, that's their first concern. How will we have a world without violent conflict if we do away with that thing that's responsible for most of the violent conflict in the world? And it is so backwards. And again, I believed it for years and years. I thought government was a civilizing influence on society. And now that I recognize what it is, I'm really ashamed I ever believed that. And I think, how did I ever believe that? And the only reason I did is because since I was a little kid, I heard it from everybody around me. Well, this is democracy, and this is great, and yada, yada, yada. So I accepted it just the way kids accept Santa Claus. The difference is when kids get old enough, parents say, well, Santa Claus isn't real. What we need is to tell all the kids, the little ones and the big ones, government isn't real either. And then it's gone. Then it has no power. So I can keep ranting ad infinitum. If anybody has a question or a comment or
I've got to be the one to ask. Who built the roads?
The roads. It's actually a good thing to use, because when we do the example of the island, I will ask that. Like, let's say somebody says, I think it might be important if we want to get rescued to have a big fire. We should probably have it at the top of the mountain so people can see it from farther away. I would like to build a path up there, because right now it's jungle. Now, who's in favor of, I get to force everybody to build a path up there? Everybody says, no. Well, who would chip in some of their effort to help build a path? And some people say yes, and some people say no, and some people say, I'm more concerned with this or whatever. So in the island scenario, nobody chooses government as the solution to the question about the roads. And it's true of every other question you bring up. And I would go through things about protection. Like we have one guy who gets caught stealing stuff from other people. And this was one of the most interesting things that happened in these discussions, is I put the scenario of, okay, this guy was caught red-handed stealing stuff from other people, a fish that somebody else caught, and he was caught stealing it, and he even admitted it. What do we do about that? And that question, and then I would just kind of let the discussion go free-for-all for a while. That question is so revealing, because it shows why people want authority and why you really, really, really shouldn't have authority. The why they want it is they want someone else to deal with that inconvenient stuff. Just call 911 and turn them over to the cops, and don't even have to think about it, because it's uncomfortable to think, here's a human being, we have him in custody, I don't even particularly like that. Now we have to think, how do we make him not steal fish? I don't want to lop his head off. for stealing a fish. That's a little harsh. But what do we do? And I'll have people actually have discussion. Well, what would you do? And some people will say, well, first of all, how about like talking to him and finding out why he thinks he needs to do that? Is it just somebody needs to teach him how to fish, maybe? Or is there some other psychological thing? And other people are like, well, if that doesn't work, we need some sort of disincentive, like, I don't know, tie him to a tree for an hour. Every time you get caught catching a fish, that's pretty humiliating. That might act as a deterrent. And whatever the direction the discussion goes, the people's priority are always twofold. Stop him from hurting others and minimize the harm to him. People don't say, just whack his head off. Because they know he's a human being. We want to be as nice to him as we can while making him be nice to us. Government doesn't ever do that. And so in that case, I'll suggest the government solution. Well, this guy was caught stealing your fish, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to steal a bunch of your stuff and force you to build a cage for me that I will put him in. I will then steal your fish to feed him while he's in the cage that I forced you to build. Who's for that? I have yet to meet anybody who said, yeah, do that, that's great. But that is the government solution to crime. Oh, he got caught stealing. Well, we're going to tax you, which means we're going to steal your money to build a giant cage, put him in it, and then we're going to keep stealing your money to feed him. Nobody would ever suggest a solution that stupid except in the context of government. And that's government's answer to almost every crime. So anyway, I'll cut my ranting off.
So what ends up, I know you kind of detailed the stealing concept, but I mean really what ends up kind of being the idea for, there's sociopaths in every society, I mean, how do we deal with it? Like what comes up with that?
Yeah, just in case people couldn't hear the question, it was basically what do we do about sociopaths? Because there are sociopaths. Not everybody is nice.
We elect them in the public office.
Yeah, we elect them in the public office. That's what we do right now. It hasn't worked too great. But it's a real question. And a lot of people assume that when I say I'm against all government, they say, well, you must trust everybody. Because that would only work if everybody was nice. I say, I don't trust everybody. And I'm not saying you don't have the right to defend yourself. Yes, there are actual sociopaths, a pretty high percentage of them. Thankfully, a lot of them are functioning sociopaths. They figured out that voluntary interaction even benefits them better. They wouldn't care if they harmed you, but you might do nasty things to them if they did, so they play the game the way civilized people with morals do. But some of them don't. What do we do about them? Again, in the island scenario, what I love to do is show that almost everybody already knows the answer, and I don't have to give it to them. So there is a sociopath on the island. This isn't just a fish thief. This is someone actually sneaking around murdering people. And he killed a few, and we caught him. It's like, holy smokes, you're evil and completely whacked out. You're actually committing murder for fun, apparently. What do we do? And a few people, including me, in that scenario would say, I would kill him. By myself, without a law, without a badge, I believe I would be morally justified in taking his life. And I think it would suck to have to kill another human being. That would be horrendously horrible. The only thing worse would be letting him kill another innocent. And if somebody says, wait, I have a way to promise that he can't ever hurt anybody else and I'll make sure he's fed. Say, if you can convince me that you can do that, 100% guarantee you won't hurt anybody else and you're not going to rob anybody else to feed him, I could go for that. But until I'm all the way sure that the innocent are protected, he's not a top priority for me. And again, in normal context, people understand the right of self-defense and organizing for self-defense. Maybe there's a guy that you have to call, and he's a guy who has guns or whatever. On the island, he wouldn't have a gun. He has a spear, and he's big and tough and really fast, and he's good at fighting. And he says, hey, if other people will give me a little bit of their food, you can call on me if there's a dispute. Now, when I show up, I'm just a guy. I'm not authority. I don't have a badge. I'm just a human with the same rights as you. I just might be a little bit more equipped at defending you from the attacker than you are. So it's a matter of ability, not right. I'm still just a human being. And the day I show up and say, I'm taxing you, you have to pay for my services, you have the right to whack my head off to stop me from doing that, because I'm still just a person. I don't suddenly acquire the right to commit aggression. And so most people on most of these questions figure out, well, we could do this. And we got to be on the lookout. And reputation is a big thing in small communities that, if it comes out that guy is a crook and he swindles people or he's actually dangerous, You know, he's done some really creepy things that we think he might actually be dangerous. We may not have proof yet. And word of mouth spreads, and everybody knows, all right, beware of that guy, and be ready to protect yourself from him. These are solutions that people can naturally figure out on their own. And the reason so many people put their questions in the form of what will be done about, what they mean is, what's the central plan for that? And it takes so much thought and mental exercise, and it did for me, to get to the point to realize there shouldn't actually be a central solution, because a central solution means one guy comes up with a plan and forces it on the rest of us. I don't know what the other 7 billion people are going to do if there's a murder in their town. I can say what I might do, but who cares? I'm that one guy over there. I'm not going to be emperor of anarchy. I'm not going to rule the world. I'm not going to be in your neighborhood. I'm probably not going to do anything about the murder in your neighborhood. I can give you suggestions on what I think about it, like don't punish people unless you're really sure they actually did it, and don't go overboard on the punishment, but do make sure there aren't future victims and things like that. But people are so used to hearing the centralized authoritarian solutions. Well, here's my plan for how I'm going to solve the problem of poverty or crime or this or that or the other thing. And it's always based on, first, I take all of your money. And then I write a law that controls everybody. And then I, out of the benevolence of my heart, violently impose my agenda and fix the world. And we've had thousands of years of that, resulting in hundreds of millions of deaths. Murders, I should say, not just deaths, not just accidental, intentional killing of innocent human beings. And what people need to do is step into the uncomfortable zone, which says, we're now the big people, we're the grown-ups. We're not little kids in the classroom who can say, teacher, Johnny's bothering me. We say, all right, we're it, we're all there is. We're the top level, we're responsible human beings. We on our own have to figure out how to deal with things, and each of us are completely responsible for our own actions. None of us can say, I was just following orders. It doesn't work in an anarchist society. There cannot be Nazis in an anarchist society. There cannot be dirty cops saying, well, I didn't make the law, I'm just enforcing it. Because everybody would say, you're the one doing it. You're the one responsible for what you're doing right now. Don't be beating me over the head saying, well, the law or something made this happen. You made it happen. And people only buy that excuse now because they believe in authority and law and legislation. If they let go of that, yes, it's uncomfortable to have to be responsible for your own actions and actually solve the problems of humanity. The good news is, if you don't imagine government, your solutions will always be better than the solutions government offered, which are always based on starting by robbing everybody and violently controlling innocent people.
Yeah, I was going to say, with the situation of psychopaths, sociopaths on the island scenario, it were to get around, they'd be ostracized as somebody that does that, and they, anybody that they try it on again, it's like individual, whoop his ass, you learn a lesson, or he'll be disabled permanently eventually. Mm-hmm. And my actual question was, like in the scenario where government is wrong, why should we allow it? It's the individual societies or nations that we have, like say North Korea, where people are slightly more indoctrinated into their religion, and they have these weapons available. Say America collectively decides, screw government. They have this system where it's more organized. They have they want to attack us. We don't have a ruling government in place. I think that's where a lot of people are like, well, what about the other places that might not be so benevolent or smart about it?
Right. To try to sort of sum up that question is basically the concern over, well, what about that scary other nation over there? If we're free over here and we don't have a government, what about that big nation over there that has a military or nukes and wants to invade us? Which is a perfectly rational concern. Any concern about there's a scary guy over there willing to hurt me, yeah, it would be nice if we had something we could do about it. The first part of my answer is, don't tell someone else that they're allowed to violently dominate you in the hopes that they'll stop some other person from violently dominating you, because that's just insane. So let's throw that one out the window. The second is, if we organize and cooperate knowing that we're all just human beings, just this country, there are about 100 million gun owners. Those 100 million gun owners even if they were, no more trained, didn't organize, didn't drill, would be undefeatable by any standing military in the world. You cannot conquer a land that has 100 million people who can kill you before you see them. It just doesn't work. Now you can nuke them and commit mass murder, but you still can't conquer them. And lastly, I would say, and this is the thing that makes people scared who are really used to government, the best, most moral, most effective, most efficient form of large-scale defense is assassination. Don't kill 1 million Germans because of what Hitler told them to do. Kill Hitler. Don't kill 1 million Chinese because of what Mao said. Kill Mao. And the funny thing is, it's so, I don't know why this didn't occur to me back when I was a statist. Why is it that all these nations will say, you're so evil, you tyrant over there, but don't worry, it's our standing policy that we never target the guy at the top.
Usually support them.
Yeah, we support them. And then we'll have a war and millions will die on both sides and we'll go and shake hands. Oh, Uncle Joe Stalin, yay. Yeah, I know you were our enemy like last week, but now we're our buddy, have half of Europe. And people think that's okay. And they don't recognize how bizarre it is. It's like, okay, here's this local gang, and there's one guy in charge, and they're committing mass murder, and we caught him, and ha-ha, now we have him under control. We're going to punish everybody except the main guy. We let him go and give him some money and help him rebuild his house that we broke some of. But that's foreign policy, and there's an open standing policy of the UN is we don't target the bad guy at the top who's actually responsible for starting this. We'll kill as many of his pawns as we feel like. We don't care about them. They're just the livestock. But we don't go for the farmer because he's one of us. And if you go for the farmer, it's really cheap and really moral. Instead of killing the underlings and the pawns, say, hey, you just openly said you're going to invade our homes where we live with your army. Well, I'm not going to sit around bothering to fight your soldiers one at a time they come here. Let's have a bake sale, raise $10 million. Whoever blows that guy's head off, who just gave the command that we be violently invaded, wins.
They call Dexter.
Right, they call Dexter. And the beauty is, not only does it solve that particular invasion, but the next guy who gets in power goes, wow, they don't shoot my soldiers, they shoot me. Maybe we can have trade and open exchange and voluntary interaction. That's the thing is, if you remove government from the equation, the belief in government, even the nasty people are usually better off interacting voluntarily. In a free society, like people talk about, oh, evil, greedy businessman. If somebody can't get away with something sneaky, I don't care how selfish or greedy he is. Because in a free society where people know what's going on, the way to get rich is make something that other people want to buy. And if some nasty, greedy Scrooge makes something that I want to buy and gets filthy, stinking rich, I don't care. I benefited. Look, I got it. It was a benefit to me or I wouldn't have bought it. And if he gets $1 bajillion, I don't mind. He isn't my boss. He can't force anything on me. So the evil, greedy businessman is not the problem unless there's a government that he can go to and say, by the way, can you use some of those laws to crush my competition and maybe give me a subsidy for the widgets I make, which means steal their money and give it to me whether they want to buy it or not. So even completely selfish, heartless people, and like I was saying before about the functional sociopaths, there are a lot of them, and most of them figure out life works better for them. They couldn't care less if you suffered and died, but it benefits them to play along like a civilized human being in the vast majority of cases, unless there's a government. Then it benefits them to try to be the government. And they're always first in line. And people can want government to care about us, but if you put a job description that says, violently dominate and rob all the people you know, who do you think is going to apply for the job? It's people who like to violently dominate other people, and that's the job of government. And that's why sociopaths are always first in line. Wow, you're just going to put that much power in front of me, and all I have to do is say, I feel your pain. How you do that? And it works, and people think, wow, he really seems to care about me. Again, if he cared about you, he wouldn't say, can I please violently dominate you and steal your money? But people somehow keep trying to imagine that there's a way for government to be good. The guy who comes up and knocks on your door and says, can I violently dominate you? There's one way for him to be good, which is say, I don't want to violently dominate you anymore. There's one way for government to be good, is for it to stop being government. And if people say, well, what about a government that only protects us and only defends our rights? I say, that organization would be great. It would not be government. Couldn't tax, couldn't legislate, wouldn't have a monopoly on anything. It would just be a private security organization with the same rights as everybody else. And I could say, I don't want to pay for your services. Either I'll defend myself, or I think they do a better job over there, or whatever. When you take away everything evil about government, it isn't government anymore. And I admit that for years, I tried to describe a government that was legitimate and moral and still government. And it took me years to realize when it gets to be legitimate, it stops being authority and government, and then it's just humanity. So I'm all for humanity and not for violent domination. So anyway, back there.
What do you think about institutions which are non-governmental but still operate by methods of domination, authoritarian domination? So, for example, like a mental hospital that uses coercive methods against patients.
The question was about institutions that aren't government but still use authoritarian domination. The example is a mental hospital. Mental hospitals sort of tie into government as things are now, because they can say, well, we've declared you insane or whatever, and by this law we get to put you in a cage and do what we want to you. And I would never claim that no individual institution other than government would ever try to be violent and dominate people. The thing is, if people don't recognize authority, then people would recognize such institutions as being immoral and would either avoid them or resisting, depending on what it took to make it not happen. And there are gray areas that are hard to say. If somebody is, one is insanity. If somebody is actually, they are so out of touch with reality that they're running around killing other people and they don't even, like, they're actually imagining those other people are evil because there's something actually wrong in their head. Well, I would like to avoid killing them, but I would more like to avoid them killing somebody else. And then there's the uncomfortable question. And again, I'm not for a moment saying there aren't uncomfortable questions without government. There still will be. The uncomfortable question is, all right, what's the minimum amount of force we can use against this person so that he stops hurting other people? And for me, the first step in the solution is the mentality. Don't imagine anybody to be authority, whether it's an institution or government. The vast majority of it these days is either government directly or something influenced by government. And the mental institutions are of course linked in with government authority. A million institutions are linked in. I mean, the medical industry. We make a gazillion dollars selling these pharmaceuticals, and if somebody comes along and says, well, I have a remedy that's really cheap and seems to work really well, and they say, hey government, can you outlaw that please? I mean, the fact that there has actually been discussion of, we think you should need a doctor's prescription to have vitamin C. Those doctors are the guy at the front door. They are not there for your benefit if they want you to have their holy permission to get vitamin C. They are the enemy and they are the bad guy, and the only reason they're doing it